I think it's most of it is because of the two girls.
With the vocal.
Yeah, the vocals.
Thank you, love.
At the heart of ABBA's unique sound were the two female vocalists, whose voices carried both the sweetness and the bittersweet emotions that defined the band's journey. But ABBA was more than just a musical phenomenon. It was the story of two couples whose personal lives were deeply woven into their creative partnership. The rise of Agnetha Faltskog and Bjorn Ulvaeus, alongside Benny Andersson and Anni-Frid Lyngstad, brought a distinct Swedish charm to the global stage, capturing hearts worldwide. Yet, beneath the glittering success lay a fragile balance. Now, years later, Agnetha Faltskog has finally broken the silence on Bjorn Ulvaeus, giving us perspective on ABBA's breakup. Let's take a sneak peek behind the curtain. Agnetha and Bjorn's marriage, public perception versus reality. Agnetha Faltskog and Bjorn Ulvaeus were, for many, the embodiment of a perfect musical and romantic partnership. Agnetha, with her striking blonde hair and crystal-clear soprano, became the captivating vocal centerpiece of ABBA's sound. Bjorn, on the other hand, was the creative architect behind much of the band's songwriting and musical direction. Together, their talents complemented one another, forming a bond that many fans idealized as a modern fairy tale. When Agnetha and Bjorn married in 1971 in the serene Swedish town of Västervik, their union was met with widespread admiration. The early 1970s were a time when the music industry, particularly in Sweden and Europe, was captivated by the rise of this golden couple. Their story was often romanticized in magazines and fan publications, which painted a picture of blissful domesticity intertwined with artistic brilliance. The public saw them as the perfect example of love, fueling creativity, a rare synergy that few bands could claim. This perception was reinforced by the warmth and openness they projected during interviews and public appearances, where they often spoke fondly of their relationship. Yet, the reality of their marriage was far more complex. ABBA's meteoric rise to global stardom, especially after winning the Eurovision Song Contest in 1974 with Waterloo, propelled Agnetha and Bjorn into a world where privacy was scarce and expectations were sky-high. In numerous interviews over the years, Agnetha has hinted at the emotional distance that grew between her and Bjorn as the band's success escalated. In a rare candid moment, she once reflected, "We were so busy being a band that we forgot how to be a couple." Bjorn, too, has acknowledged the strains their relationship endured, emphasizing how the relentless pace of their careers left little room for nurturing their marriage. The couple's relationship became a delicate balancing act, trying to maintain a loving family environment for their children, Linda and Peter, while simultaneously managing the creative and commercial demands of ABBA's global brand. The intense spotlight also magnified personal differences that might have otherwise been manageable. Agnetha's more introverted and sensitive nature often clashed with Bjorn's pragmatic and business-minded approach. While their professional partnership thrived on their complementary strengths, their personal lives revealed vulnerabilities and emotional complexities that the public seldom saw. The idyllic image of a happily married couple touring the world together gave way to subtle cracks, moments of tension, long periods of separation during tours, and the growing realization that their paths were diverging. But before we reveal what went wrong with the ABBA couple, let's take a step back. Early careers and the formation of the band. Before ABBA became a global phenomenon, its members were already carving out notable paths in the Swedish music scene. Bjorn Ulvaeus had established himself as a talented songwriter and musician, best known as a member of the Hootenanny Singers, a folk rock group that gained popularity throughout Sweden in the early 1960s. Their sound, steeped in traditional folk influences but tinged with pop sensibilities, resonated with local audiences and earned Bjorn a reputation as a gifted performer and lyricist. Meanwhile, Agnetha Faltskog was making waves as a solo artist in Sweden. From her teenage years, she showed prodigious musical talent, writing and performing songs that captured the emotional heart of Swedish pop. Her clear, crystalline voice and emotive delivery quickly earned her acclaim, making her one of the country's brightest rising stars by the late 1960s. Both were poised for something bigger, but it was their individual successes and experiences that laid the groundwork for what would become ABBA's signature sound. The 1970s music scene was a vibrant, shifting landscape, especially in Sweden, where rock, pop, and folk music intertwined with a growing enthusiasm for international sounds. Against this backdrop, ABBA was born. The band was unique, not just because of their musical style, but also because it consisted of two couples, BJÖRN ULVAEUS and Agnetha Faltskog, alongside Benny Andersson and Anni-Frid Lyngstad. The combinations of their first names actually gave the band its name. A defining breakthrough came in April 1974 when ABBA won the Eurovision Song Contest with their catchy, exuberant track, Waterloo. The contest, held in Brighton, England, was known for launching artists into European stardom, but ABBA's victory was extraordinary. Waterloo was a fresh, upbeat song with a memorable hook, and its performance showcased the group's polished harmonies and charismatic stage presence. The win was a pivotal moment that catapulted the band from Scandinavian favorites to international pop icons almost overnight. Waterloo soared up the charts across Europe and beyond, signaling the arrival of a new pop powerhouse. The seeds of this success, however, were sown much earlier. Development of Bjorn and Benny's partnership. Benny Andersson, who had enjoyed tremendous success as the keyboardist and frontman of the Hep Stars, one of Sweden's most popular bands, often compared to the Beatles, made a decisive career shift in 1969. Recognizing the unique creative chemistry he shared with Bjorn, Benny chose to leave the Hep Stars to focus entirely on working alongside Bjorn. Their transition from bandmates in separate groups to a concentrated songwriting duo was heavily supported by Stig Andersson, the influential Swedish music publisher and manager who would become a pivotal figure in ABBA's ascent. Andersson had a keen ear for talent and a visionary understanding of the international music market. He recognized early on that Bjorn and Benny possessed a rare combination of melodic inventiveness and commercial appeal. As their manager and mentor, Stig was instrumental in encouraging them to pursue not just national success, but a broader global ambition. He once famously said, "They are not just writing songs. They are crafting a sound that can conquer the world." One of the earliest fruits of Bjorn and Benny's deepening partnership was the release of the single "Hey Old Man" in 1969. This song was notable not only for its catchy melody and playful lyrics, but also because it featured backing vocals by their fiancées, Agnetha Faltskog and Anni-Frid Lyngstad. The release of "Hey Old Man" was a testing ground for what the future might hold. While it did not achieve international fame, it showcased the potential of the four individuals working together creatively. Bjorn's lyrical sensibilities combined with Benny's melodic instincts, supported by the unique voices of Agnetha and Anni-Frid, was a formula that began attracting attention in Sweden's music circles. By the early 1970s, bolstered by Stig Andersson's unrelenting belief and their growing confidence as a unit, Bjorn and Benny had laid a strong foundation for what would become one of the most successful songwriting partnerships in pop history. Their decision to focus exclusively on their collaboration, supported by the vocal talents of Agnetha and Anni-Frid, set the stage for ABBA. bringing Agnetha and Anni-Frid into the ABBA fold. Anni-Frid Lyngstad, known affectionately as Frida, entered the Swedish music scene with a distinct voice and a compelling backstory that set her apart from many of her contemporaries. Born in Norway in 1945 but raised in Sweden, Anni-Frid began her music career singing with local bands in the mid-1960s, gradually building a reputation for her smoky alto and emotional depth. It was in 1969, during a vibrant period in Sweden's music scene, that she met Benny Andersson. Their meeting was the beginning of a profound creative and personal partnership. Benny, already gaining recognition through his work with the Hep Stars and his songwriting partnership with Bjorn Ulvaeus, was immediately drawn to Anni-Frid's talent and charisma. This connection not only blossomed into a romantic relationship, but also became the vocal foundation of what would later be ABBA's signature sound. Agnetha Faltskog's story, on the other hand, is equally compelling, but marked by different challenges. Born in Jönköping, Sweden in 1950, Agnetha was a prodigious talent from a young age. By the late 1960s, she had already established herself as a solo star in Sweden with a series of successful singles and albums that showcased her emotive voice and songwriting skills. Her appeal was broad, and she was often celebrated as the blonde pop princess of Sweden, admired not only for her voice, but also for her striking looks. However, behind the public image was a complicated personal life. Agnetha's engagement to Peter Zimmerman, a Swedish music promoter, was widely publicized and appeared, at first glance, to be a conventional romantic commitment. Yet, as time would reveal, this engagement was not what it seemed. It was later uncovered that Zimmerman had orchestrated the engagement largely as a publicity stunt designed to boost Agnetha's profile in Germany's lucrative music market. This revelation cast a shadow over Agnetha's personal life, exposing the pressures and manipulations artists often faced in the music industry. The fallout from the public stunt was significant for Agnetha. Once she realized the engagement's true nature, she made the difficult decision to break off the relationship. Freed from the constraints of a relationship that was more strategic than sincere, Agnetha was able to focus more fully on her music and her collaboration with Bjorn, Benny, and Anni-Frid. The introduction of Agnetha and Anni-Frid into ABBA was a convergence of rich, complex personal narratives. Together with Bjorn and Benny, they formed a quartet that was more than the sum of its parts. A band whose personal stories of love, struggle, and ambition were woven into the very fabric of their music. This blend of personal experience and professional collaboration laid the groundwork for ABBA's extraordinary success, making their eventual breakthrough at the 1974 Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo all the more impactful. But before it could all happen, a dramatic moment played out. This may seem like something straight from a Hollywood romance film, but this was real. The moment Bjorn discovered Agnetha's voice. It was a chilly evening in Stockholm when Benny Andersson, Björn Ulvaeus, and their manager Stig Andersson gathered in a small studio, casually listening to the radio. As the soft melodies of a Swedish pop song filled the room, all three men suddenly paused. The voice that emanated from the speakers was unlike anything they had heard before, clear, haunting, and unmistakably captivating. That voice belonged to Agnetha Faltskog. Bjorn, in particular, was instantly entranced. He would later recall, there was something pure and unforgettable about her tone. It wasn't just the voice, it was the emotion behind it. It stopped me in my tracks. This serendipitous encounter with Agnetha's voice marked the beginning of Bjorn's fascination. What made it even more intriguing was that Agnetha was already engaged at the time, but we already know what happened to that relation. However, This fact was unknown to Bjorn during his initial admiration. Bjorn's interest was purely musical and, as fate would have it, deeply personal. He found himself drawn to the vulnerability and sincerity in her voice. Stig Andersson, ever the savvy manager with an eye for talent and opportunity, showed Bjorn a picture of Agnetha shortly after hearing her voice. The image revealed a striking blonde woman whose serene beauty was perfectly in tune with the ethereal quality of the vocals Bjorn had just admired. Seeing her face made it real, Bjorn explained years later. Up until then, she was just a voice, but the photo brought it all together. The revelation of her engagement came as a surprise, complicating what might have otherwise been a straightforward musical collaboration. Yet, Bjorn was undeterred. The allure of her voice, combined with the promise of a powerful creative partnership, outweighed the obstacles posed by her personal circumstances. The cultural backdrop of 1960s Sweden also played a role in shaping this moment. Sweden was emerging as a vibrant hub for pop music, with bands like Hepstars and solo artists like Agnetha pushing the boundaries of the Scandinavian music scene. The public and industry often intertwined personal lives with professional images, sometimes blurring the lines between reality and marketing. Against this backdrop, Bjorn's sincere admiration for Agnetha's artistry was both a personal and professional turning point. It foreshadowed the eventual merging of their talents and lives, a union that would give birth to ABBA's distinctive sound. Reflecting on this moment years later, Bjorn mused that the discovery of Agnetha's voice was like hearing the missing piece of a puzzle. But for this missing piece to fall into place, something had to happen years earlier. Agnetha's move to Stockholm and early career struggles. In 1967, at just 17 years old, Agnetha Faltskog made a pivotal move from her small hometown of Jönköping to the bustling capital city of Stockholm. Shortly after arriving in the city, Agnetha was discovered by Little Gerhard, a well-known Swedish singer and producer whose real name was Carl Gerhard Lundqvist. Recognizing her unique voice and raw talent, Little Gerhard helped secure a recording contract for her with Kupol Records. Despite this promising start, Agnetha's early career was far from an overnight success. Like many aspiring artists, she balanced her musical ambitions with the practical need to support herself. She took a job as a switchboard operator, a demanding yet routine role that provided financial stability but little creative fulfillment. Concurrently, Agnetha became the lead singer of a local dance band called the Gillin Flickorna, or the Golden Girls, which toured smaller venues and local dance halls in and around Stockholm. This experience honed her performance skills and introduced her to the realities of life as a working musician. It was during this period of dual work and musical exploration that Agnetha began to channel her personal emotions into songwriting. Her first major breakthrough as a songwriter came with the song Jag är så kär, or I Am So in Love, a heartfelt ballad that reflected the bittersweet pangs of her first real heartbreak. Released in 1968, the song quickly resonated with Swedish audiences and marked a turning point in her career. Not only did it showcase her vocal abilities, but it also revealed her emerging talent for lyricism and emotional expression, qualities that would later become central to ABBA's signature sound. Agnetha herself often reflected on this era as both exciting and challenging. In a rare interview from the 1970s, she admitted, "Those early days in Stockholm were tough. I was chasing a dream, but still lived with the reality of everyday struggles. Writing Jag är så kär helped me find my voice, not just as a singer, but as a person." Her ability to transform personal pain into art laid the foundation for the emotional depth that ABBA's music would later be celebrated for worldwide. Now let's fast forward to the fateful encounter with Björn Ulvaeus. This happened in May 1969 and marked the beginning of a partnership that would not only change their personal lives, but also alter the course of pop music history. The occasion was a televised variety show filmed in Stockholm, designed to showcase emerging Swedish artists. The program was a prime opportunity for exposure, but it was Stig's behind-the-scenes intuition that transformed this performance into something far more significant. He suggested a duet between Agnetha and Bjorn, hoping their contrasting styles, her crystalline, emotive voice paired with his warm, melodic tones, would create a compelling harmony. The song chosen was a tender ballad that allowed both voices to shine, their timbres weaving seamlessly together. Audiences watching from their living rooms were captivated by the unexpected chemistry that unfolded on stage. According to contemporaneous accounts and later interviews, the chemistry between Agnetha and Bjorn was palpable from the very first note. The pair's voices blended with such natural ease that the moment felt almost enchanted. After the cameras stopped rolling, Agnetha and Bjorn shared their first kiss backstage. Agnetha later described the encounter in a 1996 interview with Swedish magazine V. There was something in the way we sang together, an unspoken understanding. It felt like I had known Bjorn much longer than just that evening. This meeting was the seed of a deep creative partnership. Over the following months, Agnetha and Bjorn began collaborating closely on songwriting and performances, gradually shaping the sound that would eventually become synonymous with ABBA. Their personal relationship and professional collaboration were deeply intertwined, with their romance fueling their musical expression and vice versa. Stig Andersson envisioned a band that could resonate globally. The initial spark between Agnetha and Bjorn, catalyzed by Andersson's strategic matchmaking, set this vision into motion. Early public introduction of the ABBA couples. In November 1970, the public witnessed the first formal introduction of the two couples who would soon become ABBA, during a performance at the prestigious Cabaret Act Festival held in Stockholm. This event was an important moment for BJÖRN ULVAEUS and Agnetha Faltskog, along with Benny Andersson and Anni-Frid Lyngstad, marking the first time the quartet appeared together as a cohesive unit before a wider audience. However, despite the promising lineup and undeniable talent, their initial reception was far from the overwhelming success that would later define them. The group's formation at this juncture was tentative. The Cabaret Act Festival was a showcase for emerging Swedish talent, and while the event offered them a valuable platform, the group's performance did not immediately capture the attention of the press or the public in the way that might have been expected. Critics at the time described the act as charming but not yet fully realized. As Bjorn later reflected in interviews, "We were still feeling out who we were as a group. Individually, we had our strengths, but putting it all together was a process." Well, eventually, they did put it all together. Initially, the members themselves were cautious about committing to a permanent group. Both couples maintained separate musical and personal careers, and the idea of forming a lasting band seemed more experimental than certain. Agnetha and Bjorn, who had just begun exploring their romantic relationship, were still balancing their personal dynamics with their professional ambitions. Meanwhile, Benny and Anni-Frid, who had met in 1969 and developed a deep creative partnership, were similarly tentative about a full-time collaboration. However, the four artists found themselves drawn together by an increasing number of collaborations, both in songwriting and performance. Studio sessions at Sweden's Polar Music Studios became frequent, allowing them to experiment with harmonies, vocal arrangements, and compositions. The professional chemistry between Bjorn and Benny as songwriters was complemented perfectly by the rich, complementary voices of Agnetha and Anni-Frid. Stig Andersson, their manager and a pivotal figure behind the scenes, remained a steady source of encouragement, pushing the group toward cohesion. He believed passionately that this combination of talents had the potential to transcend Sweden's borders and capture a global audience. In a 1972 interview with Expressen, Stig Andersson commented, "These four have something special. It may not be obvious yet, but with patience and focus, they will create something truly unique." His conviction proved prescient. The slow but steady deepening of the group's connection culminated in their breakthrough with Waterloo at the Eurovision Song Contest in 1974, which would propel ABBA to international superstardom. The truth about the marriage between Agnetha Faltskog and Björn Ulvaeus. The romantic relationship between Agnetha Faltskog and Bjorn Ulvaeus blossomed alongside ABBA's ascent to global recognition. But it was never divorced from the strains brought on by their public lives and personal expectations. On July 6, 1971, Agnetha and Bjorn married in a quiet ceremony in Stockholm. From early in their relationship, the couple discussed their desire for children, believing that a family would complete their lives beyond the dazzling but exhausting world of music. This desire was so profound that even during their engagement, they spoke openly about starting a family. However, the path to parenthood was not straightforward. Agnetha initially faced difficulties conceiving, a painful experience that led the couple to consider adoption as an alternative way to fulfill their dream of having children. But their perseverance was ultimately rewarded when Agnetha gave birth to their daughter Linda in February 1973, a joyous milestone which came during a period when ABBA's career was rapidly gaining momentum. Shortly thereafter, their son Christian was born in 1977, further anchoring their hopes for a stable family life amid the chaos of celebrity. After ABBA's landmark victory at the Eurovision Song Contest in April 1974 with the song Waterloo, their fame skyrocketed, and the band was thrust into an unrelenting schedule of recording, touring, and media appearances. Bjorn embraced this whirlwind, fully immersing himself in ABBA's projects, his passion for music and public life propelling him to seize every opportunity that came their way. Agnetha, however, often found herself struggling to reconcile the demands of the career with her desire for a quieter, more private family life. The constant travel and overwhelming commitments took a toll on her emotionally, leaving her feeling isolated and disconnected from the children and the stable home environment she longed for. While Bjorn was energized by the public adulation and non-stop activity, Agnetha sought refuge in the countryside and in moments with her family. This yearning for normalcy clashed with the relentless pace of touring and promotional work. The pressures of fame and career began to erode the intimacy and communication within their marriage. While they shared the public image of a successful, glamorous couple, behind closed doors, the relationship was fraying. Disagreements became more frequent and sometimes spilled into their professional environment, with tensions occasionally disrupting recording sessions. Bjorn's tendency to dismiss Agnetha's concerns as impediments to their collective success exacerbated the rift. As Agnetha confided in later interviews, "Sometimes I felt like I was invisible, like my fears and exhaustion didn't matter because the band came first." This fundamental disconnect between their personal needs and professional ambitions laid the groundwork for the eventual breakdown of their marriage. But this was not all. Agnetha's aviophobia also became a formidable obstacle in ABBA's demanding tour schedules. In a candid interview, she admitted, "I still have fear of flying. It's my own insecurity when I'm sitting in there that there is nothing I can do." This fear intensified after a harrowing experience during the band's 1979 North American tour when their plane encountered a severe storm over the U.S. East Coast. The incident left her deeply shaken, leading to illness and the cancellation of a concert in Washington, D.C. Agnetha also grappled with the emotional toll of prolonged absences from her children. The relentless pace of international fame meant she often missed significant moments in their lives, leading to feelings of guilt and sadness. She once reflected on this, expressing how difficult it was to be away and the impact it had on her maternal instincts. This internal conflict between her role as a mother and her responsibilities as a global pop icon added layers of complexity to her experience in the band. Agnetha's struggles were compounded by the media's objectification of her, often focusing more on her appearance than her musical contributions. She once lamented, "I'm not only a sexy bottom, you know." This constant scrutiny added to her sense of isolation and reflected the disparity between her public persona and private reality. Despite these challenges, Agnetha remained a consummate professional, delivering performances that belied her inner turmoil. However, the cumulative effect of her fears, emotional struggles, and the relentless demands of fame eventually led her to retreat from the spotlight. The breaking point and separation. By the close of 1978, the once enchanting union between Agnetha Faltskog and Bjorn Ulvaeus had reached an irreversible impasse. Their marriage, which began with a romantic spark in 1969 and was solidified on July 6, 1971, had been strained by years of relentless touring, diverging personal priorities, and emotional disconnect. Despite efforts to salvage their relationship, including couples therapy in the summer of 1978, the couple found themselves growing apart. On Christmas Day of that year, Agnetha made the poignant decision to move out of their shared home, relocating with their children to a nearby residence owned by their record label, Polar Music. This was the beginning of the end of their marriage. The public announcement of their separation in January 1979 sent shockwaves through ABBA's fan base. The couple had been perceived as the epitome of pop harmony, both musically and romantically. Agnetha candidly reflected on the dissolution of their marriage, stating, "Bjorn and I can't live together any longer. We have known that for some time, but we have tried to keep it out of the publicity, simply because it doesn't have anything to do with ABBA." Despite their personal turmoil, both Agnetha and Bjorn were committed to maintaining their professional relationship within the band. They assured fans and the media that ABBA would continue, emphasizing that their personal issues would not interfere with their musical collaboration. However, the emotional toll on Agnetha was profound. She described herself as a drained shadow of her former self, feeling invisible and emotionally neglected. The rapidity with which Bjorn entered a new relationship added to her distress. He met Lena Kellersjö at a New Year's Eve party hosted by fellow band members Benny Andersson and Anni-Frid Lyngstad, just days after Agnetha had moved out. This swift transition left Agnetha grappling with feelings of abandonment and betrayal. The emotional complexities of their separation were poignantly captured in ABBA's 1980 hit, "The Winner Takes It All." Written by Bjorn, the song delves into the aftermath of a breakup, with lyrics that resonated deeply with Agnetha. She later admitted that singing the song was emotionally challenging, as it mirrored her own experiences. Bjorn, while denying that the song was a direct account of their divorce, acknowledged that the heartache of their breakup inspired the lyrics. Despite the personal anguish, Agnetha and Bjorn prioritized the well-being of their children, Linda and Christian. They purchased homes in close proximity to each other to facilitate shared parenting responsibilities. Bjorn emphasized the importance of their children's welfare, stating, "It is essential that they grow up able to see both parents when they want to." The dissolution of Agnetha and Bjorn's marriage also marked a turning point for ABBA. While they continued to produce music together, the emotional undercurrents of their personal lives inevitably seeped into their work. The band's dynamic shifted, and the once cohesive unit began to experience strain. The personal struggles of its members, coupled with the pressures of fame, eventually led to ABBA's hiatus in 1982. Reflecting on this period, Agnetha acknowledged the challenges, stating, "We just ran out of love and started annoying each other, and we argued. Finally, we made the decision and got a divorce and moved away from each other." Despite personal heartache, they continued to collaborate for the sake of the band, navigating a complex emotional landscape that often blurred the lines between their personal and professional lives. Bjorn, reflecting on their post-divorce dynamic, once remarked, "When I used to ask my wife to do things, suddenly she wasn't my wife. She was someone else. Yes, strange, but we had our burning ambition still. So this overcame everything." Agnetha, however, experienced the aftermath differently. She confessed that the divorce left her feeling mangled and in need of counseling. The emotional toll was exacerbated by the demands of fame and the necessity to present a united front for the public. She later admitted, "We always told the media that it was a happy divorce," which of course was a front. Obviously, we all know there are no such things as happy divorces, especially when there are children involved. Despite these challenges, Agnetha and Bjorn continued to perform together until ABBA's disbandment in 1982. However, the emotional strain was evident in their music. Bjorn acknowledged, "I suppose we were talking through the songs. I wrote those lyrics and she sang them with total feeling. The title is not true. There's no winner in divorce." Agnetha often felt her voice was overshadowed by Bjorn's vision for the band's future. In a 2004 interview, she stated, "Many female stars with children have probably had a similar experience. You are torn in two. One half is dying to succeed on the world stage, while the other half is a mother who wants to be at home taking care of the children." In the years following ABBA's disbandment, both Agnetha and Bjorn pursued individual projects. Agnetha released solo albums and returned to the spotlight in 2004, while Bjorn continued to work with Benny Andersson on musicals like Chess and Mamma Mia. Despite their personal history, they occasionally reunited for special events, demonstrating mutual respect and shared legacy. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.